you will be wasting your potential. And that just hit me like a fucking freight train, like ran into me in the way that I was like, oh my God. November was a month for this writer. Two big things happened and one small thing happened. The first large thing was that I went into a deep dive about my purpose here on the planet, my purpose as a writer, what am I doing with my whole business and career. So that was one large thing. The second was I finished the first edit of my book, and that showed me so much. The third was my brain gave me the thought again of deciding between traditional publishing and self-publishing and what I might want to do. So today we're going to get ready for the day and cover all three of these. Okay, we're going to get ready together as we talk about this. So the first thing on my list of three things that have to be talked about in my review of November. I keep saying October. I can't believe it's like December 2nd today, which blows my mind. But the first thing is that on October 31st, and I'll share the clip here, I admitted to myself something that I've admitted to myself once before, only once before. And because it's a big admission and because it weighs heavy on my heart. And I think I spend a lot of time when I'm not in the admission of this, denying it because it brings up really big feelings for me. So on October 31st, John and I were talking. I think it's because I read a couple of different books that were talking about abundance, being in your purpose, and things like that. And so John and I were on the treadmill, and I was like, I have something I need to say to you. And as I went to say that, my throat actually like closed up and I couldn't physically speak. It was bizarre. And then I would start talking about other stuff and my throat would clear up and then I could speak. And then I would try to say it again and my throat would close up again. It was so bizarre. But I feel like what that kind of told me was what I'm about to say like matters a lot. I have a lot of fear. There's a lot of just like emotion, obviously, that was showing up physically in my body around it. But what I admitted to him was that I felt like I wasn't walking in my purpose. I felt like, yes, I'm doing things that matter in the world, but that I quote unquote missed my calling. And I can finally say it now without like getting teary-eyed and without feeling like a failure and without feeling horrible about it, because when I said that before, it brought such a heaviness in my body. And I'll show you the clip. I'll actually play the clip right now because I recorded it that day just to get my feelings out and see what it meant. And I really feel like so much of what I was feeling was spurred because I felt like I was finally getting back into my purpose with writing the books. And I feel like that made me, because I was writing, because I was thinking about youth again and kids lives again and changing kids' lives again, I feel like it made me realize even more so that that is my purpose, right? I don't think that I only want to work with kids, and we'll talk about that after you watch the video, but it really, I think writing this book has really opened some things in me that I needed to see. So I'll play that video now. All right, I just got back from the gym and we need to talk. It's a little cat butt right there. I was running on the treadmill and I was talking to my husband, who's on the treadmill next to me in our gym, in our room, about this book that I'm reading. It's called Abundant Ever After. And what she was talking about in the book was just like living your purpose and doing, I can already feel the emotions, living your purpose and doing what matters to you, like using your gifts to make the world a better place, which is something I absolutely believe in. And I realized in that moment, like she had a journal prompt at the end and she said, if just for 20 seconds, you could muster up all the courage to write down the thing that you would actually do. Like if you had all the courage in the world, what would you actually do? Write it down. And I was like, I'm going to do this journal prompt, because at first I was like, there's nothing I'd write. I'm doing everything that I'm want to do. I feel like I'm a very good starter. I feel like in general, I'm pretty courageous. But I realized as I journaled on that it's less that I would take different actions, and it's more that my belief would be different. And I was kind of telling that to my husband. I was like, I feel like the thing I'm afraid to say is that I want to commit to being a writer for the rest of my life. Like, I want to commit to, and there's a bunch of small reasons, like, will the money come? And I'm like, that's not actually a fear of mine. Like, I'm not actually afraid of that. Like, I know money comes. Like, no matter if you follow your passion, if you follow your desire, money will always, always, always follow, especially if you believe it and you keep taking aligned action. But, and then there's another fear of like, I've never been a writer before. Like, this is brand new. I'm literally pulling it out of my brain, like out of my ear. Let's be a writer with no training, no skill, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, I also believe that you can learn along the way. I am a great self-starter, all those things. I'm like, those aren't real fears. The real fear that I have is that, and I think this a lot, and I was running on the treadmill and I was talking, which is fine because I run and I have enough cardiovascular strength for that. But as I went to try to say it, my throat literally closed. Like, I could tell that this is a block that I really have because I literally physically couldn't talk. I could say, I want to say it. And then when I would go to say it, my throat would close and I couldn't talk. I would say other words and then it would clear up and it'd be fine. But I'm afraid that I will never put purpose into the world and help people like I did when I was a teacher. And sometimes I really struggle with the idea that maybe that was my calling and I gave it up and gave it away. And I do think, like, I don't know, like, the way I want to, like, structure this in a sentence, but, like, I want to live a purpose-driven life that helps other people. And I think in becoming an entrepreneur, it was, like, really hard because I had a lot of, and I might have spoken about it a little bit on this channel before, but I've had a lot of like coaches and stuff and a lot of mentors that were all about just like making money. And I'm like, yeah, I want to make money, but of course I do because I want to fly first class to France and spend a month in France, right? So like, obviously I want to make money because I want to have those experiences. But more than anything, I want a purpose-driven life, and I want to specifically, I'm like so passionate about giving back to people like me. And I think my fear is committing to writing, like, is it the right choice? And I want to make the right choice. I want that feeling. And so I think it's important to share that because I feel like maybe there's other writers who think that way, or just if you're not even a writer, like thinking about what you want to do with your life. Like, it's not an easy question. I mean, it used to be an easy question for me. Like, teaching hands down was it. Like, well, okay, that's not true because when I first started college, I was pre-med and I was going to be a pediatric surgeon. Like, I want to be a pediatrician. So working with kids was always my idea. Well, there was a time where I wanted to be like an environmentalist, and that would have been animals. But anyways, it's like, will my books create the impact that I want them to? Will they matter? Will I be able to create perspective for people? Will I be able to help people and change people's lives and things like that? And right now, as I ask that question, like, I'm seeing lots of ways where it's possible. And I think I just need to build that belief, because I know when I build that belief, like, there was nothing that stopped me from being an amazing teacher when I was a teacher. There was nothing that, like, I was so passionate. Like, I read all the books. I learned so much. I showed up for everything I went to. Every time I got a birthday invite, if a kid ever truly invited me to their birthday and their parents said yes, that it was a true invite, I would go to every single one. I went to piano recitals and all of these things, and like showed love and care for kids outside of just the classroom. And like in the classroom, I was an incredible teacher, and I know that. And I think maybe part of the struggle is that I left not because I was done teaching. It was like a very political reason why I left. And I want to still make change. I still want to make lives better for people who grew up in low income, for people who don't believe that life can be different than it is, for people who were dealt a hand that they think fucking sucks and think that they can't get out of it. Like, I help a lot of people now with my business. And if you are one of those people, like, I'm so grateful for that. And I do feel passionate about that. I do think my life experiences help me do that for people who maybe haven't grown up like that. But I think, like, I just have to commit. And what if I'm wrong? Those are my thoughts for now. So I'm going to journal on that. And I'll probably let you know how it goes. I actually just watched that video back for the first time, like 2 days ago, a day ago. And I was like, dang, you can see the emotion on my face. You can see how much this matters to me and what it means to me to be involved in something like this. And so what has transpired since October 31st? Obviously, that was October 31st. I went through all of November still doing all of my stuff, but in the back of my mind, not in the back of my mind, definitely in the forefront of my brain, I thought about my purpose every day. And the overwhelming thought that I had was, I've missed it. I've missed my chance. It's already gone by. You were doing this work before. You could have kept doing it. You gave it up. And it made me really sad. It made me really, really sad to think that even though the book is really inspiring me, that could be the only way that I work with kids anymore. And I just keep thinking, and I can't help but think that I mean, how many people do you talk to and they're like, oh my God, I have no patience for kids. I have no da-da-da. And it's like, I believe that I have a very special gift for kids. I have unending patience. When I was teaching, I was never one of those teachers who got like exhausted from teaching. I didn't even like care about the pay, honestly. Like, of course I want to make more money, but I felt so excited, so energized, so purposeful every day. Like every day. It never went away. It never stopped. That's just how I felt. And I think that's really telling and really, really meaningful. And so I do think that I have a special gift to work with kids, to work with kids' brains. And so I had to kind of get over that idea that my chance had passed, that I only had one go, that I already gave it up, and it would be too hard to get back in the industry. I don't want to technically be like a teacher again. I would really like to not like go back to making $30,000 a year, which no shame if that's how much you make. But now that I've made more than that, like I want to keep making more than that. And if I went back to teaching, it wouldn't be possible. Also, I love the flexibility that I have now in my day and in my time, and mostly for like travel and in my schedule. And I just couldn't go back to that. So it just all felt like really, really impossible. And so we have some really good friends. Like one of my best friends used to be my coach. I don't know. I've probably talked about her before on this channel. I don't know. She used to be my life coach. And her and I, and then my husband and her husband, we all get together for like, we've done it twice now. This was our second one, and we were going to keep doing it like twice a year, where we get together and we sort of coach each other on things in our businesses, things in our brain. And so I brought this. We all got together in Denver in November, and it was like such an amazing trip. And we invited another entrepreneur couple. So all 6 of us were entrepreneurs. And that was kind of like, we weren't going to invite anybody who wasn't an entrepreneur, because being couples was really important because of how the dynamic of supporting each other. And then us both being entrepreneurs is also really different. That dynamic is really different too. So 3 of us couples, our friends, Jillian and Dan, came. And so my other bestie is Lindsay. and her husband, Chris. And so we were all there, and I brought this to them. And they coached me on it for like a day and a half, just kind of because when we're around each other, of course, we're talking about the things that we want help with. And in my like formal coaching session where all 5 of those brains were on me, talking about my needs, picking apart, asking me questions, diving into my thoughts, something that Lindsay said to me hit me so hard. And then I cried, but it wasn't a cry of like sadness like before. It was almost like a cry of, and I can feel that coming now, which I think is a good sign, but it was almost like a cry of passion, relief, meaning, purpose, to use the word purpose again. And what she said to me was, I had kept saying like these last 6 years as an entrepreneur, I've been wasted. Like I've gone off the track. I've gone so far off the track. And I was like trying to make meaning of the last 6 years. I'm like, it doesn't feel good to just like try to invent a purpose. Like, of course I learned about entrepreneurship. Of course I learned to have this open schedule. I did do a lot of healing my money mindset, which I think is really, really important and really, really powerful for me, coming from poverty to, see what I can expand and create. So all of that is really worthwhile, but I'm like, couldn't I have done that while still being in my purpose? Anyways, what she said to me was this: I feel like the last 6 years was wasted. She's like, what about the rest of your years? What about the next 50 years? She's like, and I don't remember how she said it, but she's like, if you don't step into your potential, if you don't step into what you want to do, you will be wasting your potential. And that just hit me like a fucking freight train, like ran into me in the way that I was like, oh my God, I am so moved by how I used to help kids in the past. I am so like empowered by how I used to, and it used to feel so meaningful and so purposeful. And even now I felt that's what was stirring this up in me, and this unsettling was that it felt so meaningful and purposeful that I did it before, and I just wanted to have that meaning again. She's like, basically I was acting like I could never be purposeful in the world again. And she was like, if you don't like get your shit together and go be purposeful in the world, in my mind, she didn't say it like this was my reaction to myself, and it feels very serving. It was like, I'm not going to change people's lives anymore. And that is exactly what I want. And so me wallowing and going back and forth about all of my thoughts and just like dwelling in this, I've missed it, it's passed me by, I can never again, is stopping me from being in my potential. And it's stopping, and me being in my potential helps people and changes lives. So me wallowing stops me from changing lives. So once I had that like correction of my thought, I was like, okay, I've dealt with the sadness, obviously. Now that's what I needed to be like, okay, let's flip this around and start imagining things. What would you do if this was your purpose? What would you do if like you were living in your purpose? And so there's this one person, her name is the Space Gal, and I love following her. If you don't follow her, you should. You probably do follow her. She has like 1 million followers. But what I love about what she does is she's there for kids and she inspires adults. And when I was in the height of my purpose, I was doing that. I was teaching in the classroom, creating inquiry curriculum for kids that also taught life skills, which is what's important to me. And I was also training teachers, both in my district, and then in many districts at the science level, and then also worked with the Oregon Department of Education, and then also worked with Oregon State University to make a teacher training program. So I feel like I have that special gift where I can do both, and I don't feel fulfilled unless I'm doing both. And largely, in the last 6 years, I've only been working with adults, and that's fulfilled me to an extent. And now I really need to bring that kid aspect back into my life. And writing the book has really shown me that that's been like a gaping missing hole, even though when I last admitted this, I did make strides to get back into learning and life skills. And that's when I brought back me being a curriculum consultant and working in curriculum, which I've loved. So what I've basically decided is this is so weird to see two of me. Hello. Is that I have closed down the offers that are like semi-aligned but not going in this exact direction. I'm keeping my curriculum consulting offer, my framework building offers, my VIP days to help people get an idea and create it, from idea to action plan. Like I'm keeping all of that, but I've closed down Collab. I'm not worried about my individual courses, which y'all are here for my book writing, so you don't really know as much about all of this other stuff about my business. But I'm aligning myself on my purpose is helping people see themselves and the world differently or more, expanding that vision of what they see for themselves and the world so that they can be better people in the world. And this is people of all ages, adults and children. So I believe that me writing curriculum has to do with that. But here's the exciting stuff that, back to author talk, is I think the nudges where this came from is because in writing my book, I started to imagine like going to schools and doing activations for my book and like doing read alouds and like character analysis and like guiding kids to think deeply about the moral themes in my story because we learn so much from stories. And I started getting really excited about that. And I'm like, oh, dang, like those are the kinds of things that I can start doing now. And I didn't come up with that on my own. Again, I got coached and they were like, why don't you start doing something now? Why can't you go do an activation on this exact topic now? And I was like, so my books and my stories are one of the vessels in which I do what I do for kids to help widen their perspective of the world, to help them feel seen, to help them see the world differently, themselves and the world differently, so they can see the opportunity that they have, so they can have more compassion and understanding for other people, so that they can go out into the world and be better humans. My books are one way of that, but I'm going to be, since I've closed down these other things that are distracting, that gives me more time to think about my books. And it allows, I closed down the other thing, gives me more time to think about my books. But it also allows for me to just expand this part of my business really and what I'll do with it. So that's my goal, is to expand this like kid stuff. That's what I'm calling it for now, kid stuff. And how I've started so far, and I just did my very first thing on Substack though. So I've had a Substack for adults this whole time. And then I just started this Substack for kids where I've taken ideas from when I was an elementary school teacher, and I'm going to be sharing kind of stories and how I thought that helped kids develop life skills. But I am going to also use real life things that are happening to create activities that families can do with their kids to build real life skills for them. So I published the first one. It was like a Black Friday, Cyber Monday holiday shopping one that I'm really excited about. I'm going to do another one about like buying Christmas trees and how to turn that into a fun activity that you could do with kids to help them learn life skills. So I'm really, really excited. But I think that the thing that feels so important about this is that I'm like, I think before I've spoken so many times about not feeling like I could just go full in on the book. I felt like I wasn't allowed to go full in, I think it's because I had my mind in all of these different things with my other offers and selling my courses. The idea of selling my courses, even when I'm not actively selling them, takes up so much brain space. And the fact that that is gone, I can feel my creativity flourishing. I can feel my mind like being different. And y'all, when we get to the book updates, there are so many book updates that I feel so good and excited about. And so I feel like this talk of purpose, that while this is mainly AuthorTube and I, talk about writing my book, aren't really on the topic of my book, they influence how I'm going to be able to have time and space and interact with my book and books, the series and everything so much. And so I just feel so good and so aligned and so at peace. And it also makes me just wonder how many people are living the way that I live. Like I can feel so much spaciousness just like in my chest now that this stuff just isn't taking up my brain space. And it's like, how many people live in like in a way, I felt like my business was golden handcuffs because I could make a lot of money selling courses, doing like no work at all. And that's why I thought would help me have space and time to write. But it's like, it took up too much brain space because it wasn't aligned, because it's not my purpose. And I'm walking away from that. I can find limitless money potential, limitless impact somewhere else. And I do feel that when I'm aligned in my purpose, that will come so much better. made it to my co-working place for the day. I loved coming here. I was going to talk to you on the walk here, but it was raining and an umbrella and all of these things, so wouldn't be able to do that. So let's dive into the second thing, and that is the changes that have come with my book. So the big thing that happened in November was that I finished doing the first edit and talked to my book coach about it. And honestly, in going through the edit, I saw so much stuff on my own. Like, where was I not being clear? Where was this character shallow? Where was maybe this plot line not even needed? Where was this character needed to be more? Where was this character needed to be less? Where was the plot confusing? What do I need to grow? And so by the time I got to the end, and I'll tell you this, I changed like the entire ending of the book to lean more into, I've talked to you about leaning more into like the fantasy element, the magic element, but also I felt like there wasn't like because when I very first started this idea, it was leaning on my memoir and it was parts of my life and real things that have happened in my life. When I had the finale, it wasn't like the finale. The ending wasn't like, there wasn't like a big bad. There wasn't something I really defeated. It was more of just like an internal thing, but there wasn't part of the structure on the outside that, like they call it the A story and the B story, as you guys know. So I felt like that A story wasn't that strong. And so I wrote something completely different. And I was like, okay, well, with this and with this being stronger, what I need to do is I need to then go back and add in other things that actually lead to this so it makes sense. So I really feel like the book as it stands right now, there's like the first half is basically one book and the second half is another. And so I called that completing my edit because I just need to get it to my book coach so she could actually read it, so that when we would talk about it, she'd actually know more than just my ideas. But since then, since finishing it, and one of the things that I feel like is really important all the time with any sort of project is to spend time away from it. So I finished it right before we left for Denver. So it was like November, mid to late November, like November 20th or something. And spending that time away and just like watching stories around me, books that I've read, movies that we've watched, I started to see even more in detail, was watching them like a writer. And what I decided was, I think my story needs an entire overhaul. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to kind of replot out my entire story, because I think as I was writing that first part and then getting to that second part, I just felt like I said, it became two different stories, and I'm seeing more strongly, or I'm seeing where I'm getting distracted from the whole point. The whole point, and like I just talked about with my purpose, the whole point is to create stories that change how people see the world and themselves. And I realize I don't have to tell my specific story to do that. Like when you think about books like The Hunger Games, that changes the way we see government and the world and like classism. And so, and that wasn't Suzanne Collins' real life story, right? So I'm seeing more clearly now how I want like the ending to be, and I think that that's really going to influence then what the beginning is. And there's parts of my story, I've printed it off now again, but single page this time, that way I can go through and edit it more, which will be way easier. I'm seeing more how I want the end to be and what I want the revelation to be, and it's really changing things that go over the whole arc of all three books. So today what I'm going to work on, what I'm starting my day with, is just kind of going over that plot line and seeing what I want it to be. And what I thought I was going to come here and talk to you guys about before this time away from the book is there's some scenes that I knew that I wanted to switch. Like I feel like there's certain parts of the story, like the catalyst in the beginning, that part where it's like nothing can ever be the same after this, and that's what puts her out into like seeing the world in a different way and puts her on that adventure. Like I felt like my catalyst for that was really weak. And then I feel like some of those midpoints, I feel like that was really great. Like I think my favorite chapters when I was going back and editing, I was like, dang, 15 and 16. I loved them so much. So I loved that and felt really good about that. But then the finale felt like how it wrapped it all up just felt really weak. So I'm going to replot something because I have a new idea for the finale. And really, I think what's going to happen is the withering, you guys all know, is how I've kind of created poverty as a thing and an entity versus to kind of resemble like the poverty mindset that people are in. And I was going to, maybe I won't even put this in this video because I don't maybe want you to know that. Anyways, there's going to be a big piece that's going to be revealed, like a big reveal that I thought was going to be in the second book that I want to put now into the first book. And that's part of like the thing that kicks the finale into gear and into going. And I want her there to be almost like this feeling of betrayal from the people around her. I really like the way that this way of the book could go, and I'm going to explore with some plot, but basically the whole thing is going to change. And editing, finishing that edit, really showed me just like the really weak parts of the story that need to be developed more and what I want to truly tell. The other thing that I've really been thinking about is, as I've been thinking about my purpose and about what I want to do in the world, I've started to get ideas for my nonfiction book. And then also I'm starting to lean into like wanting middle grade stories. So I actually thought, like, what if this exact story turns into like an episodic middle grade book, kind of like The Magic Tree House or something kind of in that range, where there's a bunch of short books. And so that's the other thing that I want to start fiddling around with, this new plot line. And then what would happen if I started to make more of a middle grade book right now versus this young adult. I think those middle grade books are so powerful, and that's like the age group that I like really feel in for. Even though as I got older, I loved like that young adult stuff, and that was really meaningful to me. So that's the other thing that I want to play around with is, what if I already start doing my picture books and my middle grade books now? Like, I can have more than one creative writing project going at a time. So I have my iPad. I didn't bring my big ass notebook today, but I have my iPad, and I'm going to start doing some of that before Spanish lesson starts. So I spent some time yesterday after we talked at my co-working space replotting my entire book as I predicted, going through that edit and getting these ideas down. And I'm just watching the world so much more as a writer than I ever have before. And as I sat and I used my iPad, which I think I told you. And all for the people, I don't want to give spoilers. Like, I feel like I am conflicted about that all the time on this channel, about giving spoilers or not, because I know you want to read the book. And if it were me, I wouldn't want to know. So what I'm going to do is when I did the like brainstorm, I actually did it on freeform on my iPad. So I'm going to screenshot it and I'm going to give it to my book coach, but I'll also put it on the screen here so that you can see the updates. I'll also share it on the screen. But what I realized is, and I kind of said this before, but sitting down and having time to plot really showed me there were characters that didn't matter. And the biggest thing that matters to me, and where I feel like I did a poor job in my first book, was in kind of like the B story or the little P plot, as Brandon Sanderson says, where it's like the emotional part. It's like, that's the most important part to me. Like a fantasy and whatever, the actions that are happening, I kept getting like making them more important. And then the little P plot, the emotional plot, the like motivation inside my character's body, I felt like kept getting lost in the sauce. So when I was looking at this, I was saying, like, what are those things? Because that is what matters the most to me when I'm writing these books. It goes back to this idea of what my purpose is. And my purpose is for other people to, like, kids to read this book and feel deeply the things that I felt and feel seen by those feelings, to feel like those feelings are not wrong, that who they are is not wrong, the thoughts they're having about who they are is not wrong. And so that is what I want to create in this book. So really, when I think about this, I feel like the first draft I wrote in this book was its own book. I feel like the edit was almost its own book because I changed so much of it to lean more into fantasy. Now I feel like basically what's going to end up happening is I'm going to use bits and pieces from this book as like anchors, but I basically am going to write a whole new book. So I feel like this is going to be the third time that I'm writing this story. And I'm not bothered by that at all. Before I sat and did this kind of like brainstorming and journaling, in this kind of freeform way, I did think that it felt like problematic and like a lot of work, and that I was going to change so much. And I'm like, when I went back to saying, but what is the purpose of this book? This purpose is this story so that kids and people can feel seen and heard and felt by it. Like, then that's not a problem at all. That's what I need to do. And again, I'm not in any rush in order to finish this. So I'm really excited about it. But some things are going to be changing. Like, I've talked to y'all and gotten advice from y'all about a lot of things. And one of the things that for a long time I thought was really, really cool was this idea that Judy had a phoenix bird. And then the catalyst is that she hatched it. What I realized is that's not strong enough. That's like literally not strong enough. It needs to be something that nothing can go back to the way it was before. And if you get a little bird, so much of your life can be the same as it was. It's not inspiring you to change or anything like that. And I personally felt like a difficulty writing Aurevia, which was the name of the bird, in to the rest of the like chapters. And so I just feel like it's gonna go away. So it's like one of the characters. I'm like, what are things that are gonna change? She's not gonna hatch a little bird in like this next. What am I saying? This next edit, this next flow, like book 3 that I'm writing, story number 3 that I'm writing based on these same events and these same themes. She's just not gonna have that. So that's gonna be a big thing that changes. And so as I'm replotting this, I'm wondering and I'm thinking very specifically about the characters who are changing. And instead of saying, oh, I want to keep this character, because before when this was a memoir and it was built more on my life, I was focused more on like keeping real things from my life. But now it's more like, okay, what is the story, the emotional story that I want to tell, and which characters allow me to do that? And which characters can I also build emotional stories with? That's the way that I'm looking at it more. And I'm really, really, really excited to do it that way. So those are kind of the updates there. I feel like I'm about to write a whole new book, but I almost feel like that whole Brandon Sanderson theory, which you all know I've been watching his lecture series to learn because I didn't learn anything before writing the first book at all. And really the first edit, or I'm going to call it second book, like I only just started learning in the middle of that. And I can see how my writing changed drastically. So I'm going to keep watching those lectures and things. But he has this theory where really you got to write 5 books, he says, before you even understand yourself as a writer. And when I was first writing my book, I didn't like on that first draft, I didn't relate to that. But now that I've gone through and edited it, and now that I see everything I want to change, I feel that so much and I relate to that so much. Just like my voice, the way that I write, the sound that I write, the way that I develop my sentences, even looking at this draft that I have, the first half is drastically different than the back half. Like outside of my opening image, I don't really like any of the other chapters in the first half. I don't think that they're strong. They feel weak. They feel underdeveloped. They feel less exciting, less like my book coach did say, regardless of my thoughts on that, she said that I do a great job of like writing dialogue and writing voice of like how people would really sound. And she's also said that I do a fantastic job of showing, not telling, things like that. So I do think there's a lot of things that I do well, but I can see the difference in between that first half and that back half. So when I think about replotting this, I'm actually more excited than ever because I'm like, now I have reps. Now I have reps. Now I've practiced. Now I've seen it. Now I can move into this in such a fresh and new and exciting way. The other thing, and I think I might have mentioned this yesterday, that I'm really thinking about is also, what are the other books that I want to write? And so I'm going to take some time to noodle on that. And one of the things I'm thinking very specifically about this story is, do I want this story to be young adult or do I want the story to be middle grade? And I think that that would make a big difference for how I approach this. And as I'm developing the plot, this still feels young adult to me, but I feel so called to write something middle grade right now. And so, I'm going to explore like what would that be, and that's still on the docket for me to do this week. Okay, so number 3. So that was my passion, my purpose, my life change. I shared book change. So it's like new purpose in life, career change, new purpose in book, or clarified, reconnecting with purpose in book, book change. So 3. The third thing that I brought up that I wanted to cover also and tell you guys about, that an update that happened in the month of November, was my thoughts about traditionally publishing versus independently publishing. And I had originally, when we talked about this before, decided that I wanted to traditionally publish. But the more and more I listen to people who indie publish, like I really love Amy McNee, Inspired to Write. And I was listening to her podcast the other day with her husband, James. And one of the big pulls to traditionally publishing is that they cover all the costs for you and they can get into the doors and it just feels good. Like there's pride in that. I plan on being a traditionally published author. Does it have to be my first book? No, because the pride that comes with that can come whenever it comes, right? And so one of the other things that I was thinking about is just like the capital up front. It is not nearly as expensive as I thought. And expensive is subjective. But Amy McNee and James, they shared that it costs somewhere between 4 and 7,000 US or Australian dollars, which I'm not even sure how many that is in American dollars. But like $4,000 to $7,000. Let's say that it's like $2 American, so 8 to 14,000 to produce books. And that includes the editing, the cover art, the distribution. That's way cheaper than I thought. Like, why would I have a publishing company do that for me and then I only get $3 on the book when they're only fronting like 10K? I know they're also fronting if I go on the book tour and things like that. So that doesn't count like paying for book tours, etc. It's just starting to sound more enticing to indie publish right now. That's starting to feel more exciting. So as of right now, I'd totally be cool to independently publish my book when I finish it. So I feel like so many things in the month of November, I just changed my mind on. And I'm so curious for you. I know a lot of you guys that are following me are writers, and I want to know this for you. Have you rewritten an entire book? What was it like? What was your relationship with the book? Do you think, like Brandon Sanderson, that it takes 5 books for you to get good at writing enough to have a book that you want to finish, that you feel good about publishing and giving to the world? Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that? And then also, if you're new here, tell me if you want a trad pub or indie pub. I'm really excited about these updates. I feel really good. I just feel like so aligned. One of the things that I used to talk about with y'all is like my schedule is so hard. And the other day I realized, yesterday, in fact, that I worked on, now that I'm like aligned in my purpose and I'm only allowing myself to do things aligned in my purpose. It didn't matter if I was working with a curriculum client. It didn't matter if I was writing my book. It didn't matter if I was writing my Substack. I did all of those things yesterday and I never felt pulled away. I didn't feel that my brain had to like readjust, which was one of the things that felt really hard. It was like before I would go and coach, I needed to have a whole separate day of writing day. And it feels so good for that not to be the way I feel anymore. So that has been so excited for me. I literally cannot wait for what December brings.